The silent arrival of the galaxy was not silent. It never was. Endless ships moved through the trade lanes, carrying goods, soldiers, and secrets across the stars. Empires fought, alliances broke, and new powers rose every century. But this time, something different happened. Something that made the galaxy hold its breath. A fleet appeared on the edge of the Zorith Empire's territory. Not alien, not unknown. Human dot, the Terran ships arrived without warning, without a single word of introduction. No broadcast, no request for entry, no challenge. Just silent shadows sliding out of hyperspace, their black holes absorbing the starlight. Zorith Empire, rulers of 1,000 worlds, did not understand silence. They were used to loud enemies, empires boasting of conquest, pirates shouting threats, rebels screaming defiance. Silence was unnatural. Silence was dangerous. The first. Alien commanders thought it was a mistake. Perhaps the human communication systems were damaged. Perhaps their diplomats were slow. They tried sending messages, dozens of them. In every known language, got no reply. The Terran ships simply drifted, their formation perfect, their weapons hidden. But waiting. For the first time in centuries, a mighty Zorith felt a shadow of doubt. Inside the Imperial Council chamber, panic grew. Holograms of the Terran fleet floated above the table. Admirals argued. Generals demanded action. Politicians tried to calm the room, but their voices cracked with fear. Why are they here? One counselor shouted. They know this is Zorith. Space. They are only a few dozen ships, another said, trying to sound brave. We should crush them before they multiply. But then a quiet voice reminded them of old whispers, forgotten by most, but never erased. The doctrine. The word froze the chamber. Everyone had heard the rumor, but none wanted to believe it. The Terran doctrine, humanity's secret law of war. Some said it was a myth. Others said it was a curse. Whatever it was, no empire wanted to face it. Yet, here on their borders, stood the fleet of Earth, silent, waiting. On the bridge of the lead Terran ship, Captain Eric Vale stood with his hands behind his back. His crew worked in silence, every action precise. The galaxy thought humans were reckless, emotional, unpredictable. But not today. Today they were ice. Vale looked at the star lines fading on the screen. The Zorith fleet was already moving to. Meet them bright ships of silver and red, covered in glowing weapons. Thousands of them. Shall we broadcast, sir? His communications officer asked. No, Vale said softly. His eyes never left the enemy fleet. They know we are here. That is enough. The officer hesitated, but obeyed. No words were sent. No threats. Only silence. The Zorith commander, Lord Drusgar, paced inside his flagship. He was not used to waiting. He was not used to fear. His empire ruled by fire and steel, and no species had ever stood against them without trembling. But the Terrans, they just stood there. They mock us, Drusgar growled. They think silence will frighten us. But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. It was working. Every moment of silence stretched like a blade across his throat. He ordered his ships closer. Tens of thousands of weapons locked onto the Terran fleet. Still, the humans did not move. Not one engine flare, not one shield raised. Just waiting. Finally, one of Dreskar's aides whispered the thought everyone feared. What if they want us to strike first? Dreskar stopped. His claws tightened around the edge of his chair. That was the danger, wasn't it? Stories from the outer colonies spoke. Of humans who never started wars, but always ended them. Wars that burned brighter than any before. Wars that no one forgot, and so the mighty Zorith hesitated. Back on the Terran flagship, Captain Vale spoke again. His words were calm, cold, and absolute. The doctrine does not change. We do not start wars. We end them. Let them choose. His crew nodded, silent and steady. They had all grown up hearing the doctrine. It was not just a rule. It was their identity. It was humanity's shield and sword. The galaxy might laugh at humans, might underestimate them, might even pity them. But the doctrine was always waiting in the shadows. Now, on the edge of Zoreth space, the shadows had arrived. The first 5 minutes of silence stretched into 10. 10 became 20. Alien soldiers sweated inside their armored suits. Admirals gripped their chairs so tightly their claws cracked. And still, the humans said nothing. Silence became fear. Fear became anger. Anger became madness. The galaxy watched the border of Zoreth space. Every empire, every scout, every hidden spy waited for the first move, for the spark that would ignite everything, but no one knew who would break first. Silence was the weapon, and humanity had mastered it. Asterisk whispers of fear. The galaxy had always told stories about humans. Some were jokes, others were warnings, and a few were whispered in the dark, never written in official records. But now, with Terran ships hovering at the edge of the Zoreth Empire, those whispers turned into storms of fear. No shot had been fired. No word had been spoken. Yet every empire listened. In the great halls of the Valen Confederacy, ambassadors leaned close, their voices low. Why are the Terrans silent? One asked. Because silence is louder than war. Another answered. The council chamber fell quiet after that, each alien remembering old tales of human fleets that had appeared from nowhere, destroyed enemies in hours, and then vanished before. The galaxy could react. On the far side of space, in the Ultran markets, traders argued in panic. Prices of weapons, fuel, and mercenaries rose in a single night. Nobody wanted to be the next empire standing in Terran crosshairs. One merchant muttered a line he had heard from an old soldier long ago. The Terrans don't fight to win. They fight to end. That phrase spread like fire through the stations and colonies. It was repeated in hushed tones, carved into walls, even transmitted in secret messages across the star's dot. Inside the Zoreth Empire itself, fear turned into anger. Lord Dresger stood before his generals. His voice shook the chamber as he demanded answers. Why do they just wait? Why do they not speak? No one could answer. The generals argued among themselves. Some said the Terrans were weak, afraid to act. Others said they were luring the Empire into a trap. And then there was the third group, the ones who trembled and whispered the Forbidden's name. The doctrine. The room went still. The doctrine is only a legend, Dresger snapped. A human myth. A ghost story for fools. But even as he spoke, his eyes betrayed doubt. Because deep inside, he too had heard the stories. 1,000 light years away, in a quiet corner of the galaxy, an old commander of the Zeran Dominion sat in a dark tavern. He had once fought the humans. He had once lost. When the younger soldiers mocked the Terran silence, he only laughed bitterly. You children do not understand, he said. Humans are not silent because they are weak. They are silent because they have already decided what happens next. And when the doctrine is spoken, there will be no turning back. The young ones asked him what the doctrine was. He only shook his head. Pray you never hear it. Back on the border, the Zoreth fleet circled like restless predators. Thousands of ships surrounded the Terrans, weapons glowing, ready to fire. But still no order came. Still, the humans drifted in silence. Inside the Terran flagship, Captain Eric Vale stood calmly, watching the enemy tighten its noose. His officers waited for his command. None came. The doctrine was clear. They would not fire first, but the galaxy would not wait forever. Every empire hungered for an answer. Would the humans bend? Would the Zoreth crush them? Or would the doctrine finally be revealed? In the deep chambers of the Imperial Academy, a young Zorth historian searched through Forbidden's files. His claws shook as he uncovered old records of the First Human War, records that were never supposed to be read again. He found words carved into stone by alien survivors long ago, words that echoed across time. Do not force them to remember. Do not awaken the doctrine. His breath caught in his throat. He realized too late that the Council, the generals, even Lord Dresger himself, had forgotten history. And now history was about to repeat. In the quiet of the Terran flagship, the crew waited. No music, no chatter, no fear, only patience. And outside, across the galaxy, billions whispered in fear. The doctrine was coming, but none knew what it truly meant. Not yet. Asterisk. The doctrine revealed the Zorth Empire had fought many wars. They crushed rebellions, destroyed colonies, and enslaved weaker species. Victory was their nature, their history, their pride. But now, staring at the silent Terran fleet, they faced something new, something they could not understand. Silence had become their enemy. For days, the humans gave no answer. No demands, no signals, not even a warning. It was as if the Terrans were waiting for the galaxy itself to act first. Lord Dreskar's patience finally broke. He ordered a small squadron to capture one of the Terran ships, hoping to force them into speech. The squadron never returned. Their final message was brief. Only static, a scream, and then nothing. The silence returned, heavier than before. The Council of the Zorth Empire grew desperate. They needed to know what this doctrine truly was. For centuries, it had been nothing but rumor. Now those whispers were strangling them. So they sent spies. One of those spies, a young officer named Rinner, was captured by the Terrans. Instead of killing him, the humans did something worse. They let him listen. Inside a cold chamber aboard the Terran flagship, Captain Eric Vale stood before the alien. His voice was calm, steady, like iron wrapped in shadow. "You wish to know our doctrine," Vale said. "Then listen well. You will carry it back to your masters." The chamber grew still. The crew stood in silence as Vale spoke words that had been carried through generations of humanity, carved into their blood and memory. Humanity does not start wars. We never have, and we never will. But if war is brought to us, we do not fight to win. We fight until our enemies cannot rise again. We fight until our name is written into the bones of the stars. This is the Terran doctrine. Rinner felt the words cut through him like blades. They were not shouted. They were not threats. They were promises. The humans did not speak of peace. They did not speak of mercy. They spoke of endings. The alien spy trembled, realizing why the galaxy feared these words. The doctrine was not a military plan. It was a vow, a law of existence. Humans would never start the fire. But once the fire began, they would burn entire empires to ash. The next day, Rinner was released. The Terrans allowed him to return to his empire. They wanted the doctrine to spread, and it did. Across the galaxy, the words raced like lightning. Broadcasts carried them to hidden colonies. Traders whispered them in markets. Soldiers repeated them in fear. We do not fight to win. We fight to end. Every species remembered old scars. They remembered the wars where humans had been pushed too far. Wars where enemies vanished, their fleets shattered, their planets left in ruins. The doctrine was not legend anymore. It was alive again. Inside the Zorth War Council, chaos erupted. "This is madness," one general shouted. "They cannot destroy. We are too strong." "They have done it before," another whispered. "You know the old records. You know what happened to the Drethax, to the Krylin, to the Harkonnen. Those names were ghosts, ancient empires that once ruled vast regions. Of space, all gone, erased, and in every story, one name lingered at the end Terrans. Lord Dresger slammed his fist onto the table. They want to frighten us with words. That is all this doctrine is. Words, but deep in his heart, he knew it was more. The silence of the humans, the precision of their ships, the calmness of their captain, all of it pointed to one truth. The doctrine was not just spoken. It was waiting to be lived. Back on the Terran flagship, Captain Vale stood at the bridge, his gaze fixed on the endless stars. His crew waited, silent and disciplined. "Sir," his second officer said softly, "the enemy prepares. They will strike soon." Vale nodded once. His voice remained calm. "Then they will awaken the doctrine. And once awakened, it does not sleep." For the galaxy, the whispers of fear had become a storm. Now they carried a shape, a name, and a vow. The doctrine was no longer rumor. It was the law of humanity. Consume, the galaxy would learn what it truly meant. Asterisk. The first strike, the silence could not last forever. For days, the Terran fleet drifted like shadows in the void, unmoving, unbroken, unbothered by the thousands of Zorath ships that surrounded them. But silence was poison to the Zorath Empire. Their warriors lived on fire, on noise, on conquest. Waiting was weakness, and weakness was death. At last, Lord Dresger broke. "Strike them," he commanded. His voice was sharp, full of anger, but also fear. "Let the galaxy see that the Zorath Empire does not bow to silence." The order spread through the fleet. Engines roared. Cannons burned. Waves of energy blasts lit the darkness like a storm of suns. Dozens of Terran ships vanished in the explosion. At least that was what the Zorath believed. Cheers rose from their soldiers. But their victory cry died quickly. The shadows of the Terran fleet reappeared, not destroyed, not even touched. Shields of black light shimmered for only a heartbeat before fading again. The humans had not fired a single shot. They had only endured. And now, they moved. Captain Eric Vale stood at the center of the Terran flagship, his hands behind his back. His face showed no anger, no pride, only calm resolve. "Return fire," he said. The command was quiet. The result was thunder. From the Terran ships erupted streams of energy, unlike anything the Zorath had seen before. Silent, precise, devastating. Where the Empire fired storms, the humans answered with daggers of light, each strike cutting through a ship's heart. 100 Zorath warships burned in the first minute. The second minute claimed 200. More. The cheers of the Empire turned into screams. Lord Dresger watched in shock as his proud fleet crumbled. "This is impossible," he shouted. "They are only dozens, we are thousands." But numbers meant nothing in the face of Terran resolve. For every 100 Zorath ships that fired, one Terran ship answered, and its strike ended them all. The doctrine was alive now. And it was merciless. On the bridge of the Terran flagship, the crew moved like one body. Calm voices called out readings. Steady hands controlled weapons. No one panicked. No one shouted. They had trained for this. They had grown up hearing the doctrine in their homes, their schools, their histories. Every strike they made was not just an order. It was destiny. Target their command ships. Vale said. The screen flashed as massive Zorath dreadnoughts exploded one by one. Leaders screamed as their signals cut into silence. The Empire's power cracked before their eyes. But then something strange happened. After destroying hundreds of ships, the Terrans stopped. Their guns went silent. Their formation returned to stillness. They had not finished the enemy. They had only reminded them. Vale's voice carried across the communication channels, reaching every Zorath ship, every frightened soldier. "We do not start wars. But you have started this one. Remember, we warned you. Leave now, or face the full weight of the doctrine. The Zorath commanders trembled. Never before had an enemy struck so hard and then stopped. It was not weakness, it was warning. A final. Yet Lord Dreskar's pride could not accept it. His claws dug into his throne. His face twisted with rage. No. He roared. We will not be frightened into surrender. Every ship advance. The Empire obeyed. Tens of thousands of ships pushed forward again, driven by pride, not reason. The galaxy watched. Other empires leaned closer to their screens, their whispers sharp as knives. They had seen the warning. Now they would see the punishment dot inside the Terran flagship. Vale gave the final command. No more mercy. End it. The doctrine was no longer a whisper. It was fire. The Terran fleet moved as one. Their weapons roared in silence. Their shadows danced across the battlefield. Zora's ships fell like stars collapsing. In minutes, what had been the might of an empire became wreckage floating in the void dot, and through it all, the humans did not cheer. They did not scream. They did not rejoice. They only ended. When the battle was over, the Zorath Empire had lost more ships in 1 hour than in a century of war. Survivors limped back to their worlds, carrying only fear and silence. The Terrans did not chase them. They did not conquer. They only left the message written in the wreckage. The doctrine has spoken. Fire and shadows. The battlefield was silent again. Wreckage drifted across the void-broken ships, shattered hulls, and the cold remains of thousands of Zorath soldiers. Fires burned in the blackness of space, glowing like dying suns. The Terran fleet stood untouched. Not one ship had fallen. Not one formation had broken. The galaxy watched through hidden eyes, spies, scouts, distant observers. What they saw was not victory. What they saw was judgment. The Zorath Empire had been struck, and the blow was worse than any defeat. It was humiliation. On the bridge of the Terran flagship, Captain Eric Vale remained calm. His crew reported the battlefield with quiet precision. Survivors were fleeing. Signals begged for mercy. Shall we finish them, sir? One officer asked. Vale shook his head. His eyes remained on the stars. No, we've made our point. Broadcast this message. The officer obeyed. Across every channel, the same words. Reached the broken Zorath fleet. Leave. This is your only chance. Do not return. Next time, there will be no survivors. The survivors heard it. Some wept in relief. Others trembled in shame. None dared to answer. They turned their ships and fled, dragging what was left of their empire's pride. But fear spreads faster than fire. In every corner of the galaxy, the message was replayed again and again. Leave. This is your only chance. Some races whispered that the Terrans were merciful. They had crushed the empire, but still allowed survivors to escape. Was this kindness? Others saw it differently. They said it was not mercy at all. It was warning. A shadow before the storm dot inside the Zorath Council. Chamber, Lord Drescar raged. He smashed tables, tore banners, and cursed the humans with every breath. They should have killed us all, he shouted. Instead, they insult us. They think us too weak to finish. But many of his generals disagreed. Fear was in their eyes. They could have destroyed us, one whispered. They didn't. That is worse. They are showing restraint. And restraint means they can do far greater things if they choose. The council was divided. Some demanded revenge. Others begged to withdraw. The empire was breaking not just in ships, but in spirit. Meanwhile, in hidden corners of the galaxy, other empires debated. The Valen Confederacy feared that the Terrans would march on them next. The Ultron traders began hoarding supplies, expecting another war to erupt. Even the distant, powerful Dominion spoke in hushed tones. All remembered the doctrine. We don't fight to win. We fight to end. But why, they wondered. Did the humans stop? Why offer a chance to retreat when they could have erased the Zorith? Completely? Was it morality? Was it arrogance? Or was it part of something even darker? On the Terran flagship, Captain Vale stood before his crew. His voice was steady. They will return. Pride will not let them forget. And when they return, the doctrine will finish what it has begun. His officers nodded. They knew this was not over. Silence had been the first weapon. Fire had been the second. Shadows would be the third. The humans were not only fighting battles, they were shaping the galaxy's memory. Every word, every silence, every strike would echo for centuries. Back on a distant colony world, a young alien child listened to her parents whisper the story. She had never seen a human. She had never fought in a war. But as she heard the words, "Leave or there will be no survivors," she shivered. The galaxy was changing. Empires of fire and steel now feared shadows and silence. And in every corner. The Terran doctrine was no longer just a myth. It was a shadow hanging over every world. The fires of war had been lit, but humanity had shown the galaxy something far more dangerous than raw power. They had shown restraint, and restraint meant control. Asterisk, the turning point, the Zorith defeat, spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Every transmission, every secret recording, every whisper carried the same story. An empire of thousands, crushed by only dozens of Terran ships. Some empires laughed nervously, pretending the Zorith had been weak. Others stayed silent, knowing the truth. But one fear united them all. If the doctrine could end Zorith, who would be next? In the council halls of the Dominion, rulers argued. They struck without mercy. One said, "They showed restraint." Another whispered, "That is worse." The debate burned through every chamber, from the Confederacy to the traitors' guilds. And finally, for the first time in centuries, the galaxy agreed on something. The Terrans must be destroyed. On 100 worlds, fleets were built. Shipyards worked day and night. Soldiers were recruited, weapons forged, alliances sealed. A grand coalition was formed. Species that had hated one another for generations now stood side by side. The Valen, the Dominion, the Confederates, even the remnants of XO-Wrath.1 banner. One cause. To end humanity. On Earth, the Terran Council already knew. Reports poured in from spies and scouts. A fleet unlike anything in history was being prepared. Tens of thousands of ships, maybe hundreds of thousands. Inside the Terran war chamber, the atmosphere was calm. No shouting, no fear. Only silence. Captain Eric Vale stood at the head of the table, his eyes steady. "They are coming," he said. "All of them." The counselors nodded. Not one asked if Earth could survive. Not one questioned the doctrine. They had lived with it for centuries. They knew what it meant. Vale spoke again. His voice was quiet, but every word was iron. "We don't start wars. But they have chosen this. They believe numbers will crush. U.S., they believe unity will protect them. They are wrong. We will not fight to win. We will fight to end." Across the galaxy, the coalition gathered at a single star system, the Great Convergence. It was a sight no one had ever seen. Armadas stretching across the horizon. Fleets so vast they blotted out the stars. Commanders boasted. Soldiers roared. This time the Terrans will fall. This time no doctrine will save them. But behind the noise, unease lingered. Because the galaxy remembered the silence of the Terrans, their calm, their control. The doctrine was not just power. It was certainty. Back on the Terran flagship, the crew prepared. They did not rush. They did not panic. Each officer moved with quiet discipline. each soldier with steady hands. Vale walked the bridge, his voice low. Remember the doctrine. We are not here to win battles. We are here to write memory. Every strike, every word, every silence will echo for centuries. His crew nodded. Their eyes burned with resolve. They were not fighting for victory. They were fighting to ensure. The galaxy never forgot who humans were. When the Coalition fleet finally appeared, the void itself seemed to shake out millions of lights. Ships of every design. Cannons glowing like suns. The galaxy cheered. Surely no power could stand against this. Surely not even the Terrans could endure such numbers. But when the humans arrived, their fleet was small. Only hundreds of ships against thousands. Shadows against stars. The galaxy laughed. The Coalition roared, and the Terrans remained silent. Lord Dresger himself, scarred but alive, stood at the front of the Coalition. His claws pointed at the humans. End them. He screamed, burn Earth from the stars. The order was given. The void exploded with fire. On the Terran flagship, Captain Vale watched the storm of weapons descend. His crew looked to him. He gave the final words before the battle began. Let the galaxy learn. The doctrine does not bend. The doctrine does not break. Today we end. And so began the greatest battle in galactic history. The turning point. Day the galaxy tried to erase humanity and discovered the true meaning of the doctrine. Asterisk. Legacy of the doctrine of void became fire. The Coalition fleet unleashed everything it had: beams, torpedoes, missiles, plasma storms. The stars themselves seemed to disappear under the weight of so many weapons. It was a storm built from a dozen empires, a flood meant to erase humanity forever. For a moment, it seemed the galaxy would succeed, but when the fire cleared, the Terran fleet still stood. Shields shimmered. Hulls burned, but did not break. The humans endured. And then they answered. From the Terran ships came silence first, as always. A silence so heavy that even the Coalition commanders felt it pressing on their chests. Then, without warning, precision. Fire erupted. Where the Coalition roared with chaos, the humans struck with purpose. Every beam found a weakness. Every torpedo hit a heart. 100 Coalition ships burned in the first wave. Then another 100. Then 1,000. The galaxy had united, yet they were falling apart. Lord Dresger screamed at his fleet. Hold the line. Overwhelm them. But the line was broken. Species that had hated each other for centuries now turned on one another in panic. Orders clashed. Fleets collided. Their numbers became a curse instead of strength. And still the Terrans moved like shadows, small, focused, relentless. On the bridge of the flagship, Captain Eric Vale gave no speeches, no shouts, no fury. His voice was steady as the stars. Target their leaders. Remove their command. Terran guns answered. Coalition flagships shattered one by one. Admirals who had promised victory vanished in seconds. Panic spread like wildfire. The Coalition, so proud, so mighty, began to crumble. The galaxy had thought humans fought for victory. But they learned the truth that day, that the doctrine was not about winning. It was about memory. That every strike was a story. Every silence was a warning. Every destroyed fleet was a lesson carved into history. The lesson was clear. Never awaken the Terran. Doctrine. Hours passed, and the Coalition's vast armada was reduced to wreckage. Millions dead. Countless ships burning. Entire empires broken. The survivors begged for retreat. And again, as before, the Terrans showed restraint. Their fleet slowed. Their weapons went quiet. Captain Vale spoke into the void. His words carried. Across every channel, every ship, every world. We do not start wars. But when you bring war to us, we end it. Let this battle be the memory you carry for all time. This is the Terran doctrine. Remember it, and never test it again. The survivors fled. Not one dared to stay. The galaxy that had come to erase humanity, now scattered in terror, broken and humiliated. And the Terrans did not chase them. They did not conquer. They simply stood in silence, their black ships drifting like shadows against the star's dot in the weeks that followed. The galaxy changed. The coalition dissolved, its members too afraid to even speak of the war. Empires pulled back their fleets. Merchants whispered in fear. Children learned the words of the doctrine as if it were a prayer. Everywhere, the same phrase was repeated. They do not fight to win. They fight to end. The galaxy understood now. Humanity did not need vast numbers. They did not need loud declarations. They only needed silence, patience, and certainty. The doctrine had been proven. On Earth, Captain Vale stood before his people. His face remained calm, his voice steady. This war is over, but it will not be the last. The galaxy will forget. They always do. And when they forget, they will test us again. When that day comes, the doctrine will be waiting. The hall was silent. Every Terran knew it was true. They did not fight for power, or for glory, or for conquest. They fought so that humanity would never be forgotten, and the galaxy would never forget this day not far away. In the ruins of Zorath, a young alien survivor whispered into the darkness, "Never awaken them again, never awaken the Terran doctrine." The word spread like a prayer, like a curse, like a truth carved into the stars. And so, the legacy was sealed. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had not demanded thrones or tribute. They had left something far greater, fear, memory, a doctrine. That would outlive empires. Asterisk,